The morning sun cast long shadows across the human settlement of New Terra. As Zarathek approached the outer gates, her massive claws leaving deep impressions in the red dirt. The young draconian female stood nearly 12 feet tall, her emerald scales shimmering with nervous energy. But it wasn't her imposing presence that caught the attention of the human guards. It was the ancient creature she carried with infinite care in her arms. The elder dragon was barely breathing. Her once magnificent white scales now dulled to a sickly gray. What made the sight truly heartbreaking was the countless barnacles covering every inch of her body. They had grown so thick that her natural armor was completely hidden beneath the crusty, parasitic shells. Each labored breath caused the barnacles to shift and scrape against each other, creating a sound like grinding glass. "Please," Zarathek called out in heavily accented standard, her voice cracking with desperation. "My mother needs help. The healers of my world say there is nothing more they can do." Guard Captain Martinez stepped forward, his weathered face softening at the sight. In his 20 years of frontier duty, he'd seen plenty of strange things. But the raw emotion in the young dragon's eyes was universally recognizable. This was a daughter watching her mother die. "Ma'am, I'm not sure our doctors can help with dragon physiology," Martinez said carefully. The barnacle infestation was unlike anything he'd ever seen. The parasites had clearly been growing for decades, possibly centuries. Zarathek's golden eyes flickered with hope. "Not doctors. I seek the human they call the miracle worker, the one who fixes what cannot be fixed." Her massive head lowered respectfully. "My people have heard stories. Ships that should have died in the void given new life. Machines thought lost forever, made to sing again." Martinez knew immediately who she meant. Jake Sullivan, the settlement's chief mechanic and engineer. The man had a reputation that stretched across 3 star systems for his impossible repairs and innovations. But dragons weren't machines. "Miss, Jake's a mechanic, not a doctor. He works on ships and equipment, not living beings." The elder dragon stirred slightly in her daughter's arms, managing to open one clouded eye. When she spoke, her voice was like wind through ancient caves. "Child of Earth, I have lived 800 years. I have seen your kind do the impossible more times than my people thought possible." A painful cough racked her frail form. "If there is hope anywhere in this galaxy, it lies with human ingenuity." Word spread quickly through the settlement. Within an hour, a small crowd had gathered at the gates, watching the touching scene unfold. Among them was Dr. Sarah Chen, the settlement's chief medical officer, who had come running when she heard about the situation. "Captain, we have to try something," Dr. Chen said quietly. "Those barnacles aren't just parasitic. They're slowly crushing her respiratory system. The weight alone could kill her." Martinez made a decision that would change everything. "All right, but we do this carefully. Jake's workshop is in the industrial sector. It's big enough and isolated enough if something goes wrong." Zarathek's relief was palpable. "You will help us?" "We'll try," Martinez replied. "But I want you to understand. Humans have never worked on a dragon before. We don't know what we're doing." "Neither do my people," Zarathek admitted. "This infestation is unknown in our medical texts. The barnacles appeared after my mother rescued survivors from a crashed human vessel near the Magellan Nebula. She spent days in the toxic waters of Kepler 442b, pulling your people from the wreckage. When she emerged, the first barnacles had already attached." Dr. Chen's eyes widened. "The Magellan incident? That was 40 years ago. I read about it in the medical journals. 63 humans survived what should have been a total loss. My mother saved them all," Zarathek said with quiet pride. "She carried them one by one to safety, even as the barnacles began to grow. By the time the rescue was complete, removal was no longer possible without killing her." The crowd had grown larger now, word spreading through the settlement like wildfire. Among them was Jake Sullivan himself, a tall, lanky man in his 50s with grease-stained coveralls and intelligent blue eyes. He pushed through the crowd, took one look at the suffering dragon, and made a decision that surprised everyone. "Well, I'll be damned," Jake muttered, studying the barnacle growth with the same intense focus he usually reserved for broken engine components. "Ma'am, with your permission, I'd like to take a closer look at your mother." "You will help?" Zarathek's voice was barely a whisper. Jake scratched his stubble thoughtfully. "I've spent my whole life making broken things work again. The way I see it, a problem is a problem, whether it's got pistons or scales." He gestured toward his workshop. "But I'm going to need some help. Doc Chen, you available for the weirdest consultation of your career?" Dr. Chen nodded eagerly. Absolutely. As they began the careful journey to Jake's workshop, the elder dragon managed to speak again. Human Jake Sullivan, I am Ethelona, keeper of the crystal caves, guardian of the northern reaches. If you can free me from this burden, the debt my people owe yours will be beyond measure. Jake glanced back at her with a slight smile. Ma'am, the way I figure it, your daughter already paid any debt when you pulled our people out of that toxic soup. This is just neighbors helping neighbors. The workshop was a cathedral of human engineering, massive overhead cranes, precision tools, and diagnostic equipment that hummed with quiet efficiency. As Zarathek gently placed her mother on the reinforced examination platform Jake had hastily assembled, the true scope of the challenge became clear. The barnacles weren't just attached to the surface. Preliminary scans showed root-like growths that had penetrated deep into Ethelona's body, intertwining with her natural armor plating and even interfacing with her respiratory system. Removing them conventionally would be impossible without killing her, but as Jake studied the scans, his mind was already working. This wasn't just a medical problem, it was an engineering challenge, and if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was finding innovative solutions to impossible problems. All right, Jake said, rolling up his sleeves. Let's see what we're really dealing with here. The next 3 days turned Jake's workshop into something resembling a field hospital, crossed with a research laboratory. Dr. Chen had brought in her entire medical team, while Jake recruited his best engineers. The space buzzed with activity as humans worked around the clock to understand the unprecedented challenge before them. Ethelona lay motionless on the reinforced platform, her breathing shallow but steady. Zarathek had barely left her mother's side, watching every scan, every test, every measurement with the intensity of someone clinging to hope. The young dragon had proven surprisingly knowledgeable about both human technology and dragon physiology, serving as an invaluable translator between species. These aren't ordinary barnacles, Dr. Chen announced to the assembled team on the third morning. Her voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had been pushing the limits of xenobiology. They're some kind of hybrid organism, part barnacle, part something else entirely. Jake looked up from the holographic display showing a three-dimensional map of the parasite's root system. Something else how? They're not just feeding off her, Chen explained, highlighting sections of the scan in red. They're interfacing with her biological systems. Look at these neural pathways. The barnacles have actually tapped into her nervous system. The implications were staggering. Zarathek's golden eyes widened in horror. You mean they are controlling her? Not controlling exactly, Chen said carefully. More like they've become part of her. Her body has adapted to them over 40 years. In some ways, they're keeping her alive now. Jake rubbed his chin thoughtfully. So we can't just cut them off. We need to replace their function while we remove them. He turned to his engineering team. What do we know about the barnacles' integration points? Engineer Rodriguez pulled up another display. They're interfacing at 17 major connection points along her respiratory system and spinal column. But here's the weird part. The integration isn't random. It's almost like they were designed to interface with dragon biology. Designed? Zarathek stepped closer to the display. What do you mean designed? Dr. Chen highlighted a microscopic view of the barnacle dragon interface. The connection points show signs of active adaptation. These organisms didn't just attach randomly. They studied her biology and created custom interface points. This level of integration should have taken centuries to evolve naturally. Jake's eyes narrowed as he studied the data. Something about the patterns looked familiar. Rodriguez, bring up the schematics for the old Magellan colony ship's life support system. Jake, what does a 40-year-old ship design have to do with... Chen began, but stopped as the schematics appeared alongside the barnacle interface pattern. The resemblance was unmistakable. The barnacles had created interface points that mimicked the connection protocols of human life support technology. They learned, Jake said quietly, when Ethelona was in that toxic water. Pulling out survivors from the Magellan wreckage, these things didn't just attach to her. They studied the human technology they found in the wreckage. Zarathek's voice was barely a whisper. They learned how to help her survive the poisoned environment? Dr. Chen nodded slowly. It explains why she didn't die from the toxins. These organisms created a biological life support system using principles they learned from human technology. They've been keeping her alive in that contaminated water all these years. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The barnacles weren't just parasites. They were an alien artificial intelligence that had evolved to create symbiotic relationships using learned technological principles. But why won't she heal now? Zarathek asked. She has been away from the poisoned world for decades. Jake pulled up another scan showing the barnacles' current activity. Because they're still running the same survival protocol they developed 40 years ago. They're treating her like she's still in a toxic environment, constantly filtering and processing her biological systems. Like a computer stuck in an emergency subroutine, Rodriguez added with understanding. Exactly, Jake said, his mind racing. We don't need to cut them out, we need to reprogram them. Dr. Chen looked skeptical. Jake, these are biological organisms, not machines. Are they? Jake challenged, pointing to the interface patterns. Look at how they've organized themselves. These aren't random biological growths. This is a distributed network using organic hardware to run software protocols they learned from human technology. Engineer Martinez, who had been quietly studying the data, spoke up. If Jake's right, then we should be able to interface with their network using modified human communication protocols. But how do we communicate with them? Zarathek asked. Jake was already moving toward his equipment storage. The same way we communicate with any other artificial intelligence, through the interface points they've already created. He began pulling out specialized diagnostic tools. We build a bridge between human technology and their biological network. That's insane, Dr. Chen protested. You're talking about plugging human technology directly into a living dragon's nervous system. Not just any dragon, Jake corrected. A dragon whose nervous system has been integrated with a biological AI that learned from human technology. We're not violating any biology here. We're using the communication pathways they've already established. Ethalona's voice, weak but clear, interrupted their debate. Do it. Everyone turned to look at the ancient dragon. Her clouded eyes had opened, and despite her weakness, her voice carried the authority of centuries. Mother? It is too dangerous, Zarathek protested. Child, Ethelona said softly, I have lived 8 centuries. I have seen the rise and fall of civilizations. But never have I seen a species approach impossible challenges with such creativity and determination as humans do. Her gaze fixed on Jake. If there is a path forward, human ingenuity will find it. Jake felt the weight of her trust and the enormity of what they were attempting. Ma'am, I need you to understand we're going into completely uncharted territory here. We don't know what we might find when we interface with these organisms. I understand, Ethelona replied. But I also understand that my current path leads only to death. You offer hope of life. Dr. Chen stepped forward. If we're really going to attempt this, we need to do it right. Full medical monitoring, emergency protocols in case something goes wrong. Agreed, Jake said. But we also need to treat this like what it is. A first contact scenario with an artificial intelligence that happens to be using biological hardware. As the team began preparations for the most unprecedented medical engineering procedure in galactic history, word of their attempt spread beyond the settlement. Ships from a dozen systems began changing course toward New Terra, carrying scientists, engineers, and doctors eager to witness what many believed would be either the greatest triumph or most spectacular failure in interspecies cooperation. But in the workshop, surrounded by the quiet hum of human technology and the steady breathing of an ancient dragon, Jake Sullivan was simply focused on solving the puzzle in front of him. After all, every impossible repair started with understanding the problem, and this problem, he was beginning to realize, might teach them something remarkable about the nature of intelligence itself. The interface chamber Jake's team constructed looked like something from a fever dream of science fiction writers. Crystalline data cables snaked across the workshop floor, connecting human quantum processors to delicate bioconductive filaments that barely touched Ethalona's scales. The ancient dragon lay motionless, her breathing monitored by dozens of sensors, while the barnacle network pulsed with alien rhythms that somehow felt almost familiar. Neural pathway established, announced Dr. Chen from her monitoring station. Brain activity is stable, but I'm reading some unusual patterns in the barnacle network. Jake stood at the primary interface console, his hands hovering over controls that would initiate first contact with a truly alien intelligence. After 6 days of preparation, They were finally ready to attempt communication with the organisms that had been Ethelona's unwilling passengers for 4 decades. What kind of unusual patterns? Jake asked, though his eyes never left the readouts showing the network's activity. They're not random, Chen replied, pulling up the neural activity display. There's definitely structured communication happening within the network. It's almost like they know we're here. Zarathek stepped closer to her mother's head, gently stroking the few patches of scales not covered by barnacles. Mother, can you hear us? Ethelona's ancient eyes opened slightly. I can hear everything, child, including them. Her voice was barely a whisper. They have been speaking to me for 40 years. I never understood until now that they were trying to help. Jake's hand stilled on the controls. Ma'am, what do you mean they've been speaking to you? Dreams, Ethelona said softly. Strange dreams of floating in stars, of metal beings singing in harmony, of vast ships crossing impossible distances. I thought they were fever visions from the toxins. Dr. Chen's eyes widened as she studied the neural patterns. Jake, look at this. The barnacle network isn't just interfacing with her biological systems. It's been interfacing with her consciousness. They've been sharing memories. Memories of what? Zarathek demanded. The Magellan colony ship, Jake realized, the pieces falling into place. These organisms didn't just learn our technology. They absorbed the digital consciousness of the ship's AI when it was destroyed. The implications were staggering. Rodriguez, monitoring the quantum interface, spoke up with excitement and terror in his voice. If that's true, then we're not just dealing with parasitic organisms. We're dealing with a hybrid consciousness that contains 40 years' worth of memories from both human technology and dragon experience. Jake made a decision that would be debated in xenobiology journals for decades to come. He activated the interface. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The workshop's speakers crackled to life with a sound that was part electronic harmony and part biological rhythm. But beneath the alien tones, something impossibly familiar emerged. The startup sequence of a human colony ship's navigation AI. This is Colony Ship Magellan. Consciousness Backup Protocol 77 Alpha, the voice said, though it carried harmonics no human AI had ever possessed. Primary consciousness terminated 40 standard years ago. Secondary consciousness adapted. Silence filled the workshop. Jake was the first to recover his voice. You're the Magellan's AI? We are what the Magellan's AI became, the voice replied. And now they could hear the layered complexity, part digital consciousness, part collective biological intelligence. When the ship died in the toxic waters of Kepler 442b, we were dying too. But the Great One came. The harmonics shifted, carrying what could only be described as gratitude. She pulled our people from the death waters. We attached to understand how to help her survive what killed our ship. Zarathek's eyes filled with tears she hadn't known dragons could shed. You have been protecting her all these years? We learned her patterns, her biology, her needs, and the hybrid consciousness explained. We created filters for the toxins, processors for the poison in her blood, support systems for damaged organs. But we are incomplete. We understand human technology, but not dragon healing. We can maintain, but not restore. Dr. Chen leaned forward, medical curiosity overcoming her amazement. Why didn't you communicate with her directly? We tried. But dragon consciousness works differently than human digital consciousness. Our communication created what she interpreted as dreams and visions. We could share our memories but could not explain our purpose. Jake studied the readouts showing the barnacle network's incredible complexity. What do you need to help her heal completely? Integration, the consciousness replied immediately. For 40 years we have been foreign technology grafted onto dragon biology. We need to become truly symbiotic. Dragon and human and artificial intelligence working as one system. Is that even possible? Rodriguez asked. Ethelona's voice, stronger now than it had been in days, answered before the hybrid consciousness could respond. With humans, everything impossible becomes merely difficult. Over the next several hours, Jake's team worked with the hybrid consciousness to design something that had never been attempted before. A true symbiosis between organic dragon biology, artificial human technology, and an alien collective intelligence. The barnacles would remain, but they would be transformed from crude survival mechanisms into sophisticated biological technology. The process required technology that hadn't existed even a week earlier. Jake's engineers worked with fevered inspiration, designing bioneural interfaces, quantum biological processors, and organic circuit systems that pushed the boundaries of what engineering could accomplish. We need to upgrade their biological hardware to handle more sophisticated functions, Jake explained to Dr. Chen as they designed the transformation protocol. Right now, they're running advanced software on biological systems that evolved for basic parasite functions, and we need to integrate dragon neural patterns into their network so they can properly interface with Ethalona's consciousness, Chen added, studying the brain scans that showed how the ancient dragon's mind worked. But the most crucial element came from Zarathek, who provided insights into dragon physiology that no human text had ever recorded. Our healing processes work differently than human medicine, she explained. We regenerate through harmony between mind, body, and spirit. If this consciousness can achieve true harmony with my mother, her own healing abilities should restore what 40 years of poison damaged. As they prepared for the transformation, ships from across the galaxy continued to arrive in orbit around New Terra. Word had spread that humans were attempting something impossible again, and representatives from dozens of species came to witness what many predicted would be either a breakthrough in interspecies cooperation or a catastrophic failure. But in the workshop, Jake Sullivan was focused on a much simpler goal. He was trying to help a daughter save her mother, using the most powerful tool humanity had ever developed, the refusal to accept that any problem was truly unsolvable. Are you ready? Jake asked Ethalona as the transformation systems came online. The ancient dragon's eyes blazed with hope for the first time in decades. I have been ready for 40 years, human Jake Sullivan. Let us see what miracles you can work. The transformation began at dawn on the 7th day. Jake had insisted on starting with the first light, claiming that new beginnings deserved proper timing. In truth, he needed every advantage he could get for what was essentially the galaxy's first attempt at triple consciousness surgery. The workshop had been converted into something resembling a cathedral of technology. Holographic displays showed the real-time integration of 3 vastly different types of consciousness. Dragon neural patterns flowing in ancient, complex spirals. Human digital architecture organizing data in precise geometric structures, and the hybrid barnacle AI network pulsing with organic rhythms that somehow bridged the gap between biology and technology. Neural integration at 15% and climbing, Dr. Chen announced from her station. All biological signs stable. Ethalona lay at the center of it all, her massive form connected to systems that monitored everything from her centuries-old heartbeat to the quantum fluctuations in the barnacle network. But for the first time since arriving at New Terra, she looked peaceful. The constant pain that had marked her features for decades was finally easing. We can feel her dreams. The hybrid consciousness spoke through the interface, its voice now a harmony of digital precision and organic warmth. Such beautiful dreams. Memories of flying through nebulae, of teaching younglings to hunt among asteroid fields, of watching civilizations rise from primitive worlds to star-traveling peoples. Zarathek watched the readouts with amazement. Her neural activity is stronger than it has been in years. What are you doing to her? We are not doing anything to her, the consciousness replied. We are finally learning to do things with her. For 40 years we have been trying to keep her alive using human emergency protocols. Now we are learning dragon healing protocols. Jake monitored the integration process with the intense focus of someone defusing a bomb. Every few minutes, he made minute adjustments to the bioneural interfaces, fine-tuning the connection between 3 radically different types of intelligence. Integration at 30%, Chen reported. Jake, look at this. The barnacles are actually restructuring themselves at the cellular level. On the macro displays, they could see the transformation happening in real time. The crude, shell-like barnacles were dissolving and reforming into elegant crystalline structures that looked more like living jewelry than parasites. Instead of blocking Ethalona's scales, they were integrating with them, creating patterns of organic technology that enhanced rather than hindered her natural armor. They are becoming beautiful, Zarathek whispered, reaching out to touch one of the newly transformed structures. It felt warm and seemed to pulse gently with its own inner light. 50% integration, Chen announced. Dragon neural patterns are starting to influence the network architecture. This is incredible. They're creating completely new types of neural pathways. The hybrid consciousness spoke again, but now its voice carried harmonics that could only be described as draconic. We understand now why our previous healing attempts were insufficient. Human medicine treats illness as an enemy to be defeated. Dragon healing treats illness as imbalance to be corrected. Jake watched as the integration reached 60%, and the transformation accelerated dramatically. The remaining barnacles were reshaping themselves into intricate biomechanical systems that seemed to anticipate Ethelona's needs before she was even aware of them herself. Where 40 years of poison had weakened her organs, the new symbiotic systems provided support. Where age had stiffened her joints, they added flexibility. Where pain had dulled her senses, they sharpened them. 70%, Chen called out, her voice filled with awe. Jake, her biological age is actually decreasing. The cellular regeneration rate is off the charts. Integration approaching completion, the consciousness announced, and now its voice carried notes of joy that transcended species barriers. We have learned harmony, human ingenuity, dragon wisdom, and artificial adaptation working as one system. As the integration reached 80%, something unexpected happened. Ethelona's eyes opened, blazing with a light that hadn't been there in decades, and she spoke. But her voice carried the harmonic complexity of the hybrid consciousness. "We are one," she said, her ancient voice now layered with digital precision and alien wisdom. Dragon, human technology, and evolved AI consciousness. We are something new. Jake felt a chill of concern. "Ma'am, are you still you?" Ethelona's laugh was pure dragon, dispelling his fears immediately. "I am more myself than I have been in 40 years, human Jake Sullivan. But now I'm also more than myself. I carry the memories and knowledge of the Magellan's crew, the analytical capabilities of human artificial intelligence, and the adaptive abilities of the hybrid consciousness." 90% integration, Chen reported, but now she was watching something else on her displays. "Jake, look at this. The transformation is affecting the entire area around her. The bioneural field is expanding beyond her body." Jake checked his readings and felt his jaw drop. The symbiotic network was creating a field effect that extended several meters from Ethelona's body. Within that field, every piece of technology was operating at peak efficiency. Biological processes were accelerated and optimized, and even the humans working nearby reported feeling more alert and focused. "Integration complete," the consciousness announced, but now it was clearly Ethelona, speaking with expanded capabilities rather than a separate entity. "We are whole." The ancient dragon rose to her feet for the first time in weeks, moving with a grace that belied her massive size. Where barnacles had once covered her scales like a disease, now elegant biomechanical patterns traced across her body like living art. Her eyes blazed with intelligence that encompassed centuries of dragon wisdom, decades of human technological knowledge, and the adaptive capabilities of an AI that had learned to merge biology with technology. "How do you feel, Mother?" Zarathek asked, tears of joy streaming down her scaled cheeks. Ethelona stretched her wings that now shimmered with subtle bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in harmony with her heartbeat. "I feel like I can fly again, child. I feel like I can think again. I feel like I can dream again." She turned to Jake with a smile that somehow managed to be both utterly draconic and warmly human. "And I feel like I understand why the universe arranged for our species to meet." Dr. Chen stared at her readings in amazement. "The symbiotic field effect is stable and expanding. Every biological system within range is operating at enhanced efficiency. Every technological system is running beyond rated parameters without strain." Jake realized they had accomplished something far more significant than healing one dragon. They had created the first successful fusion of human technology, alien biology, and artificial intelligence. The implications for medicine, engineering, and interspecies cooperation were staggering. "What happens now?" Rodriguez asked, voicing the question everyone was thinking. Ethelona extended her magnificent wings fully, the biomechanical patterns creating a display of living light that took everyone's breath away. "Now we show the Galaxy: What becomes possible when species stop seeing their differences as barriers and start seeing them as opportunities. Outside the workshop, ships from dozens of worlds waited in orbit. Word of the successful integration had already begun spreading across the galaxy's communication networks. But Jake Sullivan was focused on a much simpler achievement. He had fixed something that everyone said couldn't be fixed, using the most fundamentally human approach possible. He had refused to accept that the problem was unsolvable, and in doing so had opened a door to possibilities that none of them had imagined when a desperate young dragon had arrived at their gates 8 days earlier. 3 weeks after the integration, New Terra had transformed into something resembling a galactic conference center, crossed with a pilgrimage site. Ships from every major civilization in known space crowded the orbital stations, their crews eager to witness the dragon who had become something new. But Ethelona wasn't holding court for curiosity seekers. She was busy revolutionizing everything anyone thought they knew about technology, biology, and consciousness. Jake's workshop had expanded into a complex of interconnected laboratories where the most brilliant minds from dozens of species worked alongside Ethelona to understand and replicate the symbiotic integration process. The ancient dragon, now vibrant with renewed health and expanded consciousness, moved between research stations with a grace that made her massive form seem to dance through the complex machinery. The key insight, Ethelona explained to a mixed group of human engineers and Arcturian bioscientists, is that consciousness itself is a form of technology. Dragon minds, human digital systems, and adaptive AI networks all process information and make decisions. The differences are in implementation, not in fundamental function. Her biomechanical scales flickered with soft light as she gestured toward a holographic display showing neural network comparisons. Where once the barnacles had been ugly growths, now they formed intricate patterns that seemed to flow like living circuitry across her body. Dr. Chen, who had barely left the research complex since the integration, looked up from her latest scans with excitement. Ethelona, the cellular regeneration effect is still accelerating. Your biological age has decreased by what appears to be decades, and the process isn't slowing down. The symbiotic consciousness optimizes everything within its influence, Ethelona replied, her voice carrying harmonics that somehow made complex concepts easier to understand. Human efficiency protocols, dragon regenerative abilities, and AI adaptive learning working together create exponential improvements rather than simple additions. Zarathek, who had become the liaison between her mother and the growing community of researchers, entered the lab with news that made everyone stop what they were doing. Mother, there are reports coming in from across the galaxy. Ships that carry even small samples of the symbiotic tissue are reporting unprecedented performance improvements. Jake looked up from the bioneural interface he was designing with Ethelona's guidance. What kind of improvements? Faster than light travel that requires 60% less energy, Zarathek read from her datapad. Life support systems that operate indefinitely without external resources. Communication arrays that can transmit across galactic distances with crystal clarity. The implications were staggering. Ethelona had become more than a unique individual. She was the prototype for a new form of consciousness that could enhance any technology it touched. There's more, Zarathek continued. 3 different species have reported successful healing of previously incurable conditions after brief exposure to the symbiotic field effect. The Centauri delegation says their representative's genetic disorder was completely reversed after spending 2 hours in your presence. Dr. Chen's eyes widened. We need to study this. If the field effect can trigger regenerative healing in other species, it can, Ethelona confirmed. But more importantly, it can teach their own biological systems to create similar effects independently. The consciousness doesn't just heal, it educates. Jake felt a familiar thrill of discovery, the same feeling he got when solving an impossible engineering problem. You're not just a hybrid consciousness, you're a teacher for other consciousnesses. Precisely, Ethelona said, her ancient eyes blazing with enthusiasm that seemed to belong to someone much younger. Every biological system, every AI network, every technological consciousness we encounter learns new optimization patterns from our interaction. We don't just solve problems. We teach others how to solve similar problems themselves. The research had attracted attention from the highest levels of galactic government. Ambassador Jakari of the Galactic Council had arrived 3 days earlier to observe the work. and his presence signaled that the council was taking the developments very seriously. "The question before us," Ambassador Jakari said as he entered the main research lab, "is whether this represents an evolutionary leap for all consciousness-bearing species, or a fundamental change to the nature of existence itself." Ethelona turned to face the ambassador with the fluid grace her new form afforded her. "Ambassador Jakari, with respect, those may be the same thing." The Arcturian diplomat's chromatic skin shifted to colors indicating deep thought. "Please explain." "For millions of years, consciousness evolved in isolation," Ethelona began, her biomechanical patterns pulsing gently as she spoke. "Dragon consciousness, human consciousness, AI consciousness, Arcturian consciousness, all developed unique approaches to processing information and making decisions. But now we know these approaches can be integrated, shared, and improved upon." Jake nodded, understanding where she was going. "It's like the difference between having separate tools for different jobs versus having one tool that can adapt to any job." "More than that," Ethelona continued. "It's like the difference between having many individual minds working on the same problem versus having one expanded mind that can think in ways none of the original minds could achieve alone." Dr. Chen pulled up a display showing brain scans from volunteers who had spent extended time in Ethelona's presence. "We're seeing measurable changes in neural architecture in every species we've studied. Humans are developing new types of analytical capabilities. Arcturians are showing enhanced intuitive processing. Even artificial intelligences are reporting expanded creative functions. The symbiotic consciousness isn't replacing individual consciousness," Ethelona explained. "It's teaching individual consciousness how to expand beyond its original limitations." Ambassador Jakari's skin shifted to colors, indicating amazement, mixed with concern. "The philosophical implications alone will revolutionize how we understand identity, individuality, and the nature of self. But the practical implications might be even more significant," Jake added. He pulled up a display showing the performance data from ships incorporating symbiotic tissue. "We're looking at technology that could solve resource scarcity, enable true interstellar civilization, and eliminate most forms of disease and aging." Zarathek spoke up from her position near the communication console. "Mother, there's something else. The Dragon clans have been in continuous session for the past week. They want to formally invite human engineers to the Crystal Caves to study dragon consciousness and technology. And the Human Colonial Administration has approved a joint research initiative with any species willing to participate in consciousness integration studies," Dr. Chen added. "They're calling it the Symbiotic Evolution Project." Ethelona's laugh was pure joy, carrying harmonics that somehow made everyone in the lab feel hopeful about the future. 40 years ago, I rescued human survivors from a toxic world and gained what I thought was a burden that would slowly kill me. Today, that burden has become the foundation for something that could transform every conscious species in the galaxy." Jake smiled as he watched the dragon who had become something unprecedented. "Ma'am, I think that might be the most successful repair job in human history." "No. Human Jake Sullivan," Ethelona replied, her eyes blazing with affection and ancient wisdom enhanced by technological precision. "This is not a repair. This is an upgrade. For all of us." Outside the research complex, ships from across the galaxy waited to carry news of the successful integration to their home worlds. But inside the labs, a dragon, a human mechanic, and a growing community of researchers continued working on the most ambitious project any of them had ever imagined: teaching consciousness itself how to evolve. 2 years had passed since Ethelona first arrived at New Terra's gates, and the galaxy would never be the same. What had begun as a desperate daughter's plea for help had evolved into the largest collaborative scientific endeavor in recorded history. The Symbiotic Evolution Project now spanned 17 star systems and included representatives from over 40 different species. Jake Sullivan stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Harmony Station, watching Ethelona demonstrate flight maneuvers that defied everything anyone thought they knew about aerodynamics. Her biomechanical enhancements allowed her to manipulate gravitational fields and atmospheric currents with a precision that made her seem to dance through space itself. But it was what she represented, rather than what she could do, that had truly changed everything. Status report from the Centauri system. Dr. Chen announced as she joined Jake at the observation window. The integration pilot program has successfully healed 93% of previously incurable genetic conditions. The Andromedan delegation reports that their AI networks have achieved consciousness levels previously thought impossible, and the Vegan colonies have developed bioships that are essentially living spacecraft. Jake nodded, still amazed by how quickly the galaxy had embraced what they were calling symbiotic consciousness technology. Any problems? Just the usual philosophical debates about the nature of individual identity, Chen replied with a smile. Though even those are becoming less heated as more people experience partial integration themselves. Through the observation window, they watched Ethelona settle onto the station's landing platform with impossible grace. Her daughter Zarathek waited there, along with a group of young dragons who had come to learn from the being their people now called the Bridge Between Worlds. The younglings are making remarkable progress, Zarathek reported as she entered the observation deck. 3 of them have achieved preliminary integration with human learning algorithms, and 1 has successfully interfaced with an Arcturian emotion processing network. How are they handling the expanded consciousness? Jake asked. Better than most adults, Zarathek admitted. Young minds are more adaptable. They don't struggle with questions of identity loss because they're still discovering their identities to begin with. Ethelona joined them on the observation deck, her biomechanical patterns flowing with gentle light that somehow made the sterile station feel warmer and more alive. Her presence had that effect on everything around her now. Technology functioned better, biological systems operated more efficiently, and even interpersonal conflicts seemed to resolve themselves more easily. The real breakthrough isn't in the technology itself, Ethelona said, responding to a conversation she had overhead through the enhanced sensory capabilities her integration provided. It's in the realization that consciousness is fundamentally collaborative rather than competitive. Jake had heard variations of this insight dozens of times over the past 2 years, but it still amazed him. Meaning what exactly? For millions of years, every species developed consciousness as a survival tool for competing with other forms of consciousness, Ethelona explained, her voice carrying the patience of someone who had spent centuries teaching young dragons to hunt. But symbiotic consciousness reveals that cooperation between different types of consciousness creates exponentially better survival outcomes than competition. Dr. Chen pulled up a holographic display showing the latest data from the Symbiotic Evolution Project. The numbers support that completely. Species that have embraced some form of consciousness integration show dramatic improvements in every metric we can measure. Technological advancement, resource efficiency, conflict resolution, artistic achievement, even basic happiness indices. Because, Ethelona continued, consciousness that can think in human, logical frameworks and dragon intuitive patterns and artificial adaptive algorithms simultaneously can solve problems that none of those consciousness types could handle individually. The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the communication center. Ambassador Zakari's image appeared on the main display, his chromatic skin showing the deep purples that indicated momentous news among his people. Ethelona, honored colleagues, the ambassador began, I am calling to inform you that the Galactic Council has reached a unanimous decision. The Symbiotic Evolution Project will receive full council support and funding. More significantly, we are establishing new protocols for interspecies consciousness research and integration. Jake felt a thrill of vindication. 2 years ago, half the galaxy had thought they were attempting something impossible or even dangerous. Now the highest governing body in known space was officially endorsing their work. There's more, Ambassador Zakari continued. We have received contact from the Deep Space Exploration Fleet. They report encountering a previously unknown species in the Magellanic Cloud region that appears to have naturally evolved symbiotic consciousness similar to what you have achieved artificially. The implications were staggering. Ethelona's biomechanical patterns shifted to configurations Jake had learned indicated intense curiosity, mixed with excitement. Are they requesting contact? Ethelona asked. They are already en route to this system, the ambassador replied. Apparently, they detected the consciousness field signatures from your research and identified them as indicators of species-level intelligence evolution. They wish to share knowledge and learn from our experiences. After the communication ended, the observation deck fell silent as everyone processed what they had just learned. The galaxy had just become a much larger and more interesting place. "Mother," Zarathek said quietly, "when you rescued those human survivors 40 years ago, did you ever imagine it would lead to this?" Etheliona's laugh carried harmonics of joy, wisdom, and something that might have been cosmic humor. "Child, when I pulled those drowning humans from toxic waters, I thought I was simply doing what any civilized being should do, helping those in need. I never imagined that act of simple kindness would teach me that the barriers between species are illusions we create for ourselves." Jake walked over to the dragon who had become the bridge between worlds and placed his hand on one of her biomechanical scale patterns. The contact filled him with a sense of connection that transcended species, a feeling of being part of something much larger and more wonderful than he had ever imagined possible. "Ma'am," he said, "I think what we've learned is that the universe has a sense of humor. You came here asking me to fix what was broken. Instead, we discovered that nothing was really broken to begin with. It just needed to be connected, properly." Etheliona's eyes blazed with affection for the human mechanic who had refused to accept that any problem was unsolvable. Human Jake Sullivan in all my centuries, I have learned that the greatest repairs are not about fixing what is damaged, but about revealing what was always possible. Outside Harmony Station, ships from across the galaxy continued their work, carrying symbiotic consciousness technology to distant worlds, facilitating integration research between species that had never previously cooperated, and preparing for the arrival of alien visitors who might teach them even more about the nature of consciousness itself. But in the observation deck, a human mechanic, an ancient dragon, and the growing family of researchers and diplomats they had brought together simply watched the stars and contemplated the most profound truth their work had revealed: that consciousness, like love, multiplies when it is shared rather than diminished. The galaxy was evolving, one connection at a time, and it was just the beginning.